Franz Schubert's Drei Klavierstücke were composed at the very end of his life, in the same miraculous year that produced the last three piano sonatas, the amazing string quartet with two cellos, symphonic choral works and songs. And it's always astonishing to me how a human with such a short life can produce works of such absolute depth and profundity. The first of these three pieces I find very Beethoven-like, actually. The opening and closing sections are in E-flat minor, which is very romantic, passionate and driving, but for me also very Beethoven-like. The motive in the left hand, for example, for piano aficionados, you would have heard that somewhere before in the Beethoven Opus 7 Sonata. And that is exactly what I think of when I play it. One of the things that I find amazing about Schubert's music is his ability to turn the emotional content of phrases around, often just by changing a single note. And in this particular piece, he changes to the major mode actually, but the only thing that has really changed is one note. So you have the following contrast very clearly in the beginning. Soft but very passionate still, and then he changes it to and the change is so amazing, and there's really only one note that's different in the phrase. The middle section is much more song-like, and it's in the key of B major, which for music aficionados, the common note in this between B major and E-flat minor is the G flat and or F sharp. So we have this before. The G flat now changes to an F sharp. And of course, if the piano had been an instrument like the violin or cello, the F sharp and the G flat would be fingered slightly differently. Those are only colors we can dream of when we play this piece. The emotional content of the middle section is much different than that of the main section. It's more song-like, lyrical, much warmer in sound. But with Schubert, he can never stay happy for too long. But it's okay. The music of Schubert poses very specific challenges to the performer, bringing across changes such as I just discussed in terms of mood and character, texture, drama, lyricism, takes special consideration, especially when performing it in larger spaces as we are expected to perform in today, because this is music not meant for a large space. A lot of it depends on the instrument. You have to consider your voicing, your pedaling so carefully. For example, in the middle section, in the B major section, which is so much more harmonic than the opening, you really have to voice and balance your chords with the utmost care, always listening to the long notes you produce to give the impression that you're actually shaping the sound and spinning out a long line. There are so many options on how to voice that chord, for example. An easy way out is just to play the top, of course. But if it comes from the bass, much more harmony to go with. And of course, a knowledge of Schubert's songs is vital when you perform this kind of music, since I believe that everything he composed is related to song. Listen to this, for example. That could very easily come from one of his songs or song cycles, perhaps the subject being love or something deep and profound like that. Another challenge to the performer in this kind of music is a specific kind of freedom that you need to use, because this music, of course, is not strict, but at the same time, it is not free in the sense that other romantic composers, say like Chopin or Liszt, is free. There has to be a basic pulse that you keep. And in this particular work, Schubert breaks off into flourishes, and you have to be very, very careful to make the work hang together. I will demonstrate this. This is now in the second section of the B major section in the first piece. Maybe what will be helpful is if I first play just the skeletal version of it, and then you can understand how it works contextually. Response. And then the embellished version. And this kind of drama that you hear in the tremolos and the upward scales, this is not necessarily a new thing. Schubert has already used this before in some of his earlier dramatic songs. You also will see that in the Wanderer Fantasy and also in some of his chamber music. It's a very specific and special effect that is a challenge to produce convincingly on the piano. The way in which Schubert connects the middle section back to the return of the main section is magical. He again uses enharmonic techniques to tie the two keys together and brings the section back in a sort of a dreamy, improvisatory way. Here, and then he changes again. Very uncertain. There's the question. The second of the three piano pieces by Franz Schubert, to me, is one of the most beautiful things he ever wrote. I love the simplicity of it, the beauty, and the leanness in texture. But with all of that, of course, come very specific challenges to the performer. You have to, in a sense, make time stand still. You have to have endless variety of the very simple kind. There's a certain kind of freedom that you have to exercise that needs to sound just right in the time without being affected or sugary or out of style. a big challenge to the performer is also the grading of dynamics. For example, in the second phrase, the dynamic is first piano and then pianissimo, and this happens many times over, so you have to vary it. In that instance, what I do for my own sanity, for example, is to make sure that the first phrase is not too soft, so that you actually have room to go softer in the second. Because part of the atmosphere you have to create there as well is, of course, not only the change from piano to pianissimo, but also the change from major to minor, which is so typical of Schubert and so beautiful. Uncertainty, but resolution.